Good morning, colleagues. My name is Butaneta Cheva, as already mentioned. So obviously, we are in the annual Southern Africa Innovation Forum 2021. This particular session, which is really around supporting instruments for expanding into new markets. So thank you very much, Lerato. Thank you very much, Innocent, and thank you very much, Stephen, for making the time. First of all, let me state that obviously we are in the age of a pandemic, being COVID-19, and across the whole of the continent, we have a number of interesting emerging opportunities presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. But over and above that, just to say that recent development in the context of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area agreements that have been communicated, there's a great opportunity that we can be able to take advantage of in order to be able to penetrate new markets. I think the fact that currently we are talking about access to global markets, access to regional platforms. There's obviously a number of key opportunities that are presented through which we can then be able to support the enterprises that we have in our different denominations to be able to grow. So obviously, you playing in this particular space means that you've got a number of opportunities that you can then be able to share for this particular session, so that we can then be able to have people participate and understand how best they can be able to take advantage of that. So quickly, without wasting a lot of time, I'll quickly go now into the session where I ask the first question. I think I'll give yourself, first of all, maybe to quickly tell us a bit about yourself, and then quickly now to get to the answer as it is posed to yourselves, which would obviously give us an opportunity to understand the broader context of where it is that you come from. So as communicated, colleagues, my name is Butaneta Cheva. My current portfolio is Director of Innovation and Technology in the Botswana Innovation Hub, a Science and Technology Park, where I'm overseeing aspects of the whole innovation value chain, from ideation all the way to pre-commercial level, including providing supporting funding instruments to ensure that enterprises can be able to have market access. So I think starting with yourself, Innocent, I know you've been with SeedStars for a while now, and obviously you've got a number of perspectives in terms of supporting enterprises to access different markets, and that we would want to be able to appreciate from yourself in terms of giving us perspectives on what SeedStars investment readiness programs is about. And also maybe to share some of the project's main achievements in terms of what you've been able to do so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tacheba. Just to give context on who the investment readiness program is, but before going to that, I'll actually introduce myself. So my name is Innocent Malia. I'm a General Manager for SeedSpace in SeedStars Tanzania. So I'm actually leading all the SeedStars activities in Tanzania. And over the past 2 years, we have been collaborating with the Southern Africa Innovation Support Program to bring what we call our SeedStars Investment Readiness Program, whereby ideally the program was aiming to increase the funding received by early-stage startups in the SADC region. And of course, by this, through improving their quality, that will save both time for startups and investors. So this was mainly be done through the entrepreneurship events and education, as well as the relevant connection of the stakeholders that we're actually doing in the ecosystem during the course of executing our program. So by SADC region, we are meaning the 10 countries, and the 10 countries that we were actually doing the program was Tanzania, of course, which was the hosting country. Then we had Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, which is DRC, Malawi, Mauritius, and Mozambique. I mean, one of the big, we have a lot of achievements that have been achieved through the 2 years program. One of the biggest achievement was also for the SeedStars to go into new places, such as Mauritius, Zambia, Namibia, and Malawi, which has actually given us some insights on how the innovation ecosystem is actually evolving in these countries. It was not quite a smooth kind of operation, but we actually managed to go to these new countries and we managed to get some more promising startups. The other one that we actually achieved is to improve the quantity and quality of entrepreneurs across the region. And then, of course, we have actually done 2 cohorts with a total of 36 startups, of which the first cohort was involving 21 startups, and the second cohort, which we have just finalized, involved 15 cohort. So despite all the pandemic issues and stuff, but we also managed to a bit of doing the second cohort, which was actually interesting one in the due course of the pandemic. The other achievement that we're really proud of is in terms of supporting the women entrepreneurs across these regions. I mean, across these countries. So we had a total of 43 women that were actually registered in the program, of which 18 were coming from the cohort 1 and 25 were coming from the cohort 2. And this actually has given an indicator that women entrepreneurs are actually growing in the innovation ecosystem in this country. So it's a good signing, and of course, it's actually one of the greatest achievements that we are proud of.
I think I wanted from you, as already stated, to briefly describe the goals of your project, Digilogic, in terms of what's its origins and what is it intended for.
Good morning. First of all, thanks for inviting me. So the vision of Digilogic is to boost cooperation and partnerships between African and European digital innovation hubs. So Digilogic is a Horizon Europe funded project. It began in January of this year and it'll last 3 years. And the idea is that Digilogic will contribute to developing this network of networks, this network between African digital innovation hubs and European digital innovation hubs. And that will pave the way for startups, SMEs and innovators from both continents to jointly develop smart logistics solutions in close cooperation with industries and investors, with the aim of having long-lasting startups and enterprises. Now, in 2022, next year, in May, we're going to launch calls for proposals for African and European teams to improve logistics through appropriate digital and physical innovations. We'll be evaluating the proposals we get in October 22, and then we'll have a boot camp at the end of next year, and then 12 teams will be selected, and we'll be giving them support for the following 12 months, so throughout 2023. And the aim is that if we can increase the capacity of startups to survive and grow over the long time, because at the moment the global average is the success rate is 1 in 10. So we'd like to think we can find some ways of improving upon that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think I'll definitely come back to you on that one. So it's basically being able to put out a competition and be able to screen out teams that can then be able to compete and start developing solutions from a digital perspective. Now, quickly moving forward, and this one now goes to Lerato. Lerato, coming from your current platform and basically looking at the region, can you just give us a description of the testing CG4 ecosystem analysis platform in SADC, and tell us about the main achievements so far?
So Catalyst for Growth, which was established in 2014 by a partnership between JP Morgan, USAID, and Dalberg at the time, built a platform right, which we call the C4G platform. And the platform its main aim is to actually help the BDS providers as well as the buyers of BDS, which are mostly funders and corporates and foundations, to be able to capture, track, measure, benchmark even, and report on their program data. So the providers themselves are able to then be able to measure the data, and by being able to measure the impact of their programs, they're able to then control it. The goal was to enable them to make strategic decisions around the program implementation as well as the program design based on the data that they now have at their disposal. Data is already collected, but how the data is used has not been used effectively by both the program managers as well as the buyers of BDS. Now, the program testing of the C4G platform in the SADC markets, funded by SAIF, allowed C4G to take this platform into 2 SADC markets, in particular Tanzania as well as Zambia, to test the viability of the product and to see what it would actually take to implement the same product and service into these 2 new markets. So the product itself, the program itself went very well. I mean, safe for COVID, but, having been able to access 19 BDS providers in those 2 markets and 150 SMMEs whose data we were able to collect and measure and track and report in the latest ecosystem report that we've published. So we've been able to do what we needed to do in the program, yes.
Okay. No, I think at least you have gotten the context in terms of your key initiatives across the continents and what you are doing. And I think to a large extent, we are appreciating that this is really more like prototyping and really being able to develop something that would really have an impact. I think my next set of questions really are going to be in the context of I mentioned the fact that we are currently living in the state of like a great new reset as communicated by the World Economic Forum. The incident and the disruption of COVID. So for yourself, Innocent, what processes are key to follow when an organization wishes to expand in a new market? And I would like you to elaborate this in the context of the new reset, post the COVID, because obviously that has brought in changes that we all need to be able to take into consideration for. So please just give us an elaboration on that particular aspect.
Thanks, Dr. Tacheba. So at Sitstars, we have been able also to develop what we call the internalization framework. So the internalization framework, it's actually, we are using it for all of our startups that are wishing to actually expand to the new markets. But ideally, what has been summarized in the internalization framework, we have been able to analyze only 4 sort of questions that you need to ask yourself before even you start thinking of expanding. So number 1 question that you need to ask yourself is, do you have the product market fit in your country first? So the one that you're operating. So if the answer is yes, then you go to the next question that you can actually ask yourself. Is there an internalization or expansion a priority for growth for your company right now? So you also need to provide some context into this answer. And then if you get the answer yes, and then you can go to the 3rd question, which is where now you should expand. And then this is where now you can actually get some sort of the countries that you really need to expand and see there is a market opportunity. But this question now is also related to how you are going to expand. So how you are going to expand, it's sort of the tools that are going to be used in the due course of your expansion. So in terms of how you should expand, there are sort of market research that you should be doing, which is insights. You should also get the insights of that particular country that you are going to work, but also you should develop some sort of an expansion strategy that could actually also link again to your talents that are available for you to be able to expand. And once you have all these sort of strategy around the talents, the insights, you can have a clear vision of whether you can go for that particular case or whether you cannot go for that particular country on that basis. I think I've explained it in a bit simply way.
I think, Stephen, you've elaborately talked about this initiative where you're developing you're facilitating for the development of digital platforms that aggregate different teams to be able to put together proposals for developing digital solutions in logistics. I think the next question, also in the context of looking at the incident of COVID, can you speak to the main support instruments that come or that are part of the package over and above the call that you're just going to be doing in the next session, to say, what are really the key aspects that sort of would be appealing to somebody who's wanting to be able to expand in the local African market?
Yes, so first of all, in our project, we've got represented 3 European countries, Finland, Germany and Italy. And each of those countries has its own organizations for supporting expansion into new markets. For example, Finland's got Fin Partnerships, Fin Partnership Organization, provides matchmaking services and business partnership support grants. Germany, I'm not so familiar with, but that's got GIZ, which is very active in supporting international cooperation. And then in Italy, there's AICS, which is also very active for economic development, including rural development. Then the EU has its Director General for International Partnerships. They have got various funding initiatives, platforms, for example, Digital for Development Hub, that aligns initiatives for increased impacts. Then there's the Africa-Europe Alliance, which is focusing on strengthening the business environment and investment climate between the 2 continents. Then there's the Africa-Europe Innovation Partnership. That's maybe coming to an end quite soon, but there are many more initiatives coming up. There's the Team Europe initiative, which is focused on entrepreneurship and recognizes that Africa is one of the world's most entrepreneurial continents. And there are also soft landing programs that enable African and European SMEs and startups to dive deep into new markets and ecosystems to support their adaptation and growth internationally. And then there's the well-established Horizon program of the European Union, and this has got currently targeted actions for Africa initiatives, and this is the main funding instrument by which the EU seeks to enhance cooperation with Africa.
Quickly moving on to Lerato, what key support instruments or mechanisms did you tap into when you were expanding into the Tanzanian market? I think you spoke very well of C4G and the current initiatives, and that you've been able to expand it beyond the country. So maybe now you can speak as part of your refinement processes. What support structures did you use?
Okay, I think Innocent actually went into a great list, brief but detailed in terms of the things that you need to consider. And these are some of the things that we ourselves have had to look at in terms of our current market and where we were, and the penetration that we had already done in South Africa. What were the lessons that we wanted to actually take from South Africa, but also considering the differences that would be in the market that we're going with. So we first needed to, of course, look at existing partnerships that we have. We didn't want to go into an entirely new market where we didn't have existing partnerships that would make it a little bit easier for us, because we were entering a new market. And hence Tanzania was so important for us, because our partner and founding partner, Dalberg, already has established presence there. So it was easier for us to go into Tanzania. And we actually found that it was easier to work in Tanzania than it was in Zambia, where we did not have existing partnerships. But we needed to pre-build those partnerships, by way of a consortium, of course, prior to even accessing the market, and really just educate our potential partners with regards to our product. Of course, that came with challenges, but as we needed to build this market entry strategy, considering the how we're going to enter the market, how much it will cost to enter the market, and what are the potential risks. You will then learn on the job that actually you cannot consider all the risks, and the risks actually do appear. And that's why you will need, the biggest lesson we learned and that we needed to tap into was a local presence. Really, being present in the market. Of course, COVID made it very difficult for us, especially with the restrictions. South Africa was hit hard with regards to the restrictions, but hence we succeeded more in Tanzania, where we had a local presence, than in Zambia, where our presence was not actually felt on the ground. But I think the biggest thing is really tap into your existing partnerships. If not, take the time prior to actually build those partnerships before you enter the market, because it reduces the risk, and it makes the journey a little bit easier.
Thank you very much, Lerato. I think that was quite elaborate. I think in summing it up, colleagues, because I realize that we are running out of time. I think it's obvious that obviously for all the key initiatives that you are putting across for the different ecosystems, there's great opportunities going forward to be able to tap into the, as I said, global and regional value chains amidst the current COVID-19 pandemic. I think this platform really is really an opportunity for all those that are seeking to be able to have to build enterprises, to build startups that are resilient, to be able to break into those markets, to understand the intricacies and the different challenges. And I think your sharing of your different experiences and the opportunities and the kind of expansions that you've been able to reach and the iterations that you are currently doing to further refine, I think they are a great and a valuable asset that anybody and any aspiring startup and entrepreneur out there would be willing to be able to take up. So thank you very much for your participation. We really appreciate you, and I trust that you shall keep on in supporting the African Innovation Summit in all its efforts. Thank you very much. Good morning once again, colleagues, and a good morning to your viewers online. I think at this stage, having appreciated the deliberations and having been able to participate in the earlier sessions of the Innovation Summit 2021, I'd like to once again bring you back to this particular session in breaking barriers into other markets. For the time being, I'll start taking questions, and I think the first question that I'd like to take is to Innocent, and the question is, what are the barriers to scaling out SeedStars? Followed by a second question, which is, what are the actions to overcome barriers to scaling out SeedStars? So those are the two for Innocent, and I think if you can take those for starters, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Tacheba. Good morning, everyone. In terms of the question that has been asked, in terms of what are the barriers to scale out the SeedStars, I think it was meant to be the SeedStars Investment Readiness Program, probably. So, I mean, what we have been thought of as, what we have been as a barrier. Of course, resources is one of them. Resources such as the financial resources, or sometimes the human capital that are actually existing are not existing in the different countries that we are operating into. So it was not easy, of course, to operate in the 10 countries. As I mentioned in the video, that it was not smooth in some of the countries that we are actually going for the first time. but through the help of the partnership that we have just done with the SAIS, has actually helped us to be more, make us has made the program to be more smooth. What sort of things that we are actually doing usually is to try to strike into the partnerships with the different partners that can actually help us in terms of exploring the new markets or exploring in the new programs that we are into. So such partnership, including the size that we have just been closing out. I don't know if the question has been answered well.
Yeah, thanks, Innocent. I take it that you have touched into the salient points with regard to what was raised. But I think that if there's a return question on that, we should be able to get it through. I think we are now open for questions, and I'd really like to invite all those that online to start putting forward those questions. Quickly, there's a question that is going out to Lerato. And this is coming from Chinchilla, and I think she's basically bringing the aspect around adopting certain models, and she's saying how relevant is the Western model of startups to Africa as the first question, and then she's saying what adaptations would you make to a Western model of startups to be more relevant to the current ecosystem?
Thank you for the questions. Those are hard questions. But in terms of our research, what we have found is that they're not, the Western models, even of monitoring startups and their growth and some of the metrics that are used to measure the growth are a bit far removed from the realities of Africa. And I think, in South Africa, where we've worked for a lot of years, we have mainly used those, and we have found them actually to be wanting. And our experience then going into Tanzania and Zambia further proved that point, to say that we actually do need to establish different metrics that consider socioeconomic issues, that we find in the different countries, but also what does success look like? So you have what does success look like in a crisis like we have in terms of COVID, but also what does success look like in terms of a startup and supporting a startup in an African context. And I think that's still a conversation, that the BDS providers, the providers such as Innocent and Stephen, still have to have amongst themselves in defining the real metrics. Otherwise, we're setting bars for ourselves that we can't ever achieve because of the context in which we operate and we support these entrepreneurs. I'm hoping that
that's a brilliant response, Lerato, and I think I appreciate the fact that you're really bringing in the context of that we need to sort of tailor make that which is relevant to our ecosystems instead of just sort of helicoptering in different models that may not necessarily fit. But I think just quickly moving forward, the issue of infrastructure is often brought up, especially in the context of supporting, startups to be able to break barriers. And I think the question that is coming in now is to Innocent, and it's saying, to what extent, if any, is lack of reliable internet a barrier in your ecosystem? And the follow-up to that one is, how can lack of reliable internet, especially in rural areas, become a barrier, and how can it be overcome?
Thanks again for that question. So I think as Seedstar company, so lack of internet are tested. For example, in Tanzania, particularly when we go to up country, we actually have some sort of startup that are actually claiming in terms of having high cost, for example, of the internet. So it has been something that has been somehow being cried by the startups. But in terms of who can actually sort this out, I think it's the role of the governments to intervene, and of course providing some sort of good infrastructure to come across and of course provide that internet. But also the private sector has the role to play, especially the tele companies, by helping these rural areas to have reliable internet so that they can have the development of the different solution that they have. Again, in the rural areas, there's also a quite number of good solutions that can be developed. But of course, at some point, they are being hindered by the reliable internet, but also other factors among them. Thank you.
Thanks, Innocent. I think this really brings in the aspect of the relevance of digital transformation and being able to utilize modern technologies around the fourth industrial revolution and to really power some of our African startups in ensuring that they can then be able to enter alternative markets. So I think it's a critical aspect, and I think it talks to not only ecosystem players, but I would say government at large in terms of how they really sort of play a critical role of ensuring that they roll out the infrastructure and ensure that there's actually competitive service provision to support the ecosystem. The next question is to Lerato, and it says, is Western focus on high-tech innovation so relevant to African startups? So that's the question. And then further on saying that would focus on reliable rollout of established technologies be more relevant?
All right, so I'm just trying to understand the question. So we'll focus on, so can you maybe just read it again for me?
Yes, I think, yeah, this is what the question is saying. It's saying, is Western focus on high-tech innovation so relevant to African startups? I think that's the first one.
Okay. Well, I mean, the relevance, I mean, that's a difficult one for me to answer. But I do think that within the African context, we have to look at what is it that we need to focus on. And of course, technology is not something that we need to leave behind, especially, now in this crisis where we have seen the need for technology and taking people along. But as Innocent just said right now, that we still have baby step challenges. I mean, just the access to internet is still a problem, so it becomes very difficult to run. I mean, we've monitored some tech programs in South Africa, for example, and a majority of them, I mean, outside of Silicon Cape, would be struggling, so unless the infrastructure is right, then it becomes very difficult to have our focus on just high tech, or even just some even basic entry level tech entrepreneurship. So we do need to get our infrastructure right, but we also then need to prioritize. So there are some, for example, agricultural, so we're a very resource rich continent, and we should be looking at how do we then ensure that our entrepreneurs can have access to those natural resources, but also know how to exploit them, financially and gain from them. That's still a big challenge. So right now we're a third world, trying with ambitions of first world, and we do need to find ourselves as Africa, even as the BDS ecosystem at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think you've pretty much touched on it, and I think to me, basically, what the question reflects on is, whether we are really pro Western high tech innovation as an African continent, and this is really to say, from where we sit, given that we are rich in resources, it's really about picking and choosing, those high-tech innovations that are pretty much relevant to us. And in fitting them in, it's also to say, do we have the right technologies? Do we have the right infrastructures to host the same? If you talk about agriculture, for example, one of the biggest applications that is coming in is the utilization of drones and the utilization of location-based technologies and to monitor and to assess agriculture. Those are very good for the ecosystem and to support locals that are really in that space. But it boils down, as we already talked to, having the right infrastructure to host the data, to process the data, and to ensure that it's packaged in such a way that it communicates a relevance. There's another question that I want to quickly run through. I know we're gonna be running out of time, but the question that is coming in is really on reflecting on the different models. And I think this is really talking to Seedstars. Seedstars has been in the continent for a while. It says, what models of business ownership are most relevant to Africa? For example, is it individual ownership by one person, family ownership, village ownership, social cooperative ownership, private limited companies? So those are the examples that are being given, and they're basically saying, which one of those would be most relevant, would be most fitting to Innocent.
Thanks again for the question. I think in terms of the business model, it depends on the business that you are running into, and of course, also it depends on the vision of that particular kind of a business. So, for example, if you are looking into kind of probably doing some business that will actually in the later stage requires you to go and actually fundraise to the different kind of VCs or like seed stage investors, particularly you have other choice than having a private company, as it is something that is actually recognized worldwide. But also it doesn't limit you to have some sort of individual ownership, but also it also and also it depends what sort of the business has been started with. So, for example, particularly in Tanzania, we have some different small businesses that have been owned socially with different youth, and of course, this has been they have registered from the district level up to the Tanzania Revenue Authority, and of course, they are actually getting a lot of support, but also they are also getting support from the government. So I can say it depends on the two things: the nature of the business that you are starting with, but also the vision of that business that you are looking into. So whether you are, if it's something that you are expecting to come and raise funding from investors, particularly, you have to go for the limited company. But if it's something that you have started again in terms of the social kind of capital, or like in a community, of course, it has to go through that route.
Thank you very much, Innocent. And I think maybe this one for Stephen, because I know that has not taken many questions. And I think it would also reflect on the earlier question, Stephen, in terms of Western technologies and their relevance in this day and age, especially those that would be developed with an Western ideology. A question for you that is coming in right now is, why does the Digilogic project focus on logistics? And why does it focus on African European teams?
Logistics is very important to socio-economic development. We know from looking at the behavior of ecosystems in nature, connectivity is critical. The movement of physical matter, energy, and information needs to be throughout ecosystems. Any part of an ecosystem that's not well connected in terms of physical matter, energy, and information will not thrive. And we're focused on African European teams because there are many practical, detailed reasons that the historical connections between the two continents, being in time zones, but also Europe's got a lot that could be learned from Africa.
Right. No, thanks, Stephen. I don't know whether you want to go back to the one earlier on with regard to adoption of Western technologies into the African context.
Well, I think we have to undertake very critical appraisal of any new technological innovations because they often have unintended consequences. And often new technologies are developed to get over the unintended consequences of the technologies that have come before. And we see now that with climate change and other natural responses to human technology, we don't have so much leeway now, that we can't afford to be making large scale mistakes with new technologies. So in the Digilogic program of support in 2023, we'll be focusing on critical analysis of technology, looking for ways of combining old and new technologies to make biosocial technical systems as robust as possible.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think now that we're running out of time, I think we've got one more question that I think we can quickly reflect on, and it's talking to. It says, how are the skills and education levels across SADC markets affecting ecosystem development and ability for startups to expand? What can be done, and what should we start with? I think I can give it to any one of you to be able to reflect on that. Anyone, any taker?
Well, I can go. I can give it a first step. So from our research as C4G, what we found actually is that you are finding that, especially now with COVID, more and more educated, or rather a degreed. So in South Africa, they have post-secondary school, and we saw that as well when we did the research in Tanzania and Zambia. So post-secondary, and many of them as well with degrees and honors are now getting into entrepreneurship. And that could be, because of the market. South Africa has the highest unemployment rate right now. That tells you something about employment. So people are now going into this entrepreneurship. But what then happens, and where we found frustration in our conversation with entrepreneurs, is that the ecosystem does not seem to be ready and developed, or at least the BDS, the services, the interventions, ready for an educated entrepreneur. So they still are taking the entrepreneur at a very entry level, teaching skills that the entrepreneur might have, or rather theoretical knowledge that the entrepreneur might have learned already through other institutes of higher learning, or even if they have gone through TVET and FET and have practical skills. A lot of them have bemoaned the theoretical aspects of the interventions that are in the market, in the ecosystem, and we're hoping that it would be more practical. So do not teach me accounting, teach me practically how to understand the financial statements, for example. Teach me practically how to acquire a client and how to convince a client and write a proposal, versus teaching me marketing theory and the 4 Ps and all that stuff, because those are things that I come into the room already knowing. And the fact that we are in a room with people of different levels of skill. So where do you actually pitch your intervention as a BDS provider? So there has to be a differentiated, almost curricula, and mix of services provided to entrepreneurs in order to see successes, because they do not come in at the same level of education and skills when they come in seeking interventions. And it is really sad that the interventions right now more cookie cutter, versus customized to the needs and the skills of the entrepreneurs. Granted, there are entrepreneurs that need to be taken at that level, but I think it's very important that you know your audience. And then the entrepreneurs will stick around and participate fully in the programs. That's what we found, that the education levels are there, but how do we then use them, utilize them with our interventions, and take entrepreneurs forward? And whether we're the right people to do that versus being generalists. And a lot of providers in the market are generalists and not necessarily the specialists that entrepreneurs need.
Absolutely. I think I really appreciate the diversity of the answer, in the sense that the level of expertise sometimes from a theoretical perspective does not really empower one, as opposed to some generic basic skills in terms of being imparted in a not so organized manner, not so formalized process. But eventually having an impact, in the sense that the skills are imparted and the practical results are actually seen in a short period of time. So I think let's take one more question which has come through, and this one is really talking to how can African startups incorporate consideration of nature within their business plans, for example, to mitigate the likes of climate change. And I think this question, to some extent, if I may bring it up, it talks to the whole essence of sustainability. It talks to, how do our local startups in Africa start infusing that aspects of sustainability, including when it's reporting, being able to recognize the natural capital and the fact that, as much as we want to be profitable, we need to also then consider the impact on nature. I know the question is now directed to Lerato, but I'll ask Innocent to deal with that first, and then if there's time, Lerato can address it. Innocent?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Tacheba. I think you have summarized it well as well, in terms of creating sustainable businesses, and what I mean. Some of the experience for us has not been so well in terms of creating sustainable businesses in Africa region. So the consideration that the startups should have put across is to create more sustainable business that can cut across through a different challenges that they might arise. Our advice always has been you are not supposed only to look into the profit, but also you should look into how you can actually build a good company or sustainable company. So by sustainable company, we mean you should have a good talents, you should have a good sort of solution, but also you should have done your research in terms of the product or solution that you're developing. I'll let Lerito to add it more if I've missed out something.
Okay, Lerato, you want to give it a shot so that we can close?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just taking from my experience with the providers as well as the funders of the programs that are supporting entrepreneurs. There really has not been, especially within the African context, it's been very limited. The pressure to actually consider nature in your business plan. Right, so it hasn't necessarily been there. So even if you look at the business model canvas that is broadly used, we use the normal 9-block business model canvas that looks at revenue, key partners, and cost structure, and that, versus the expanded one that actually does require that you consider nature and environmental factors in your business. So in South Africa alone, there's probably, out of 150 plus providers, BDS providers, only about 3 would be focusing on green businesses. And that really tells you that there's still a lack just within the ecosystem, and a push and a drive to require this of entrepreneurs, to require this sensitization, because it's not there. It's not in the education system anywhere. So where are we sensitized as people first, whether in corporate or even in entrepreneurship, to consider such environmental factors? And if we're going to expect that startups and entrepreneurs do this, then we need to start incorporating it into our programs, because that transformation And that focus will not just come in on its own, because you go into business to make a profit, not necessarily for any other thing. So then you need to tell me what the costs, or teach me what the costs of me making a profit are actually to nature, and how unsustainable it is for me to then consider that even in my business. So we need to rethink our own entrepreneur support packages, interventions, so that we can be able to help entrepreneurs make this change.
Now that's brilliant. I think basically what I'm getting coming out is that in terms of being able to build from the base and ensuring that it's not only a concept that is currently foreign or looking at big companies. The whole concept around the King 4 reporting, being able to ensure that your triple focus reporting is brought into the scene, is not necessarily just for high corporate entities. It will have to be impactful. Well, it will have to be effected at the lower level, so that small, medium enterprises, innovation-driven enterprises also start taking that into consideration. Because if they don't, and there's so many of them, the impact on the environment is going to be felt within a very short space of time. So colleagues, I think we've come to the end of the session, supporting instruments for expanding into new markets in the context of expanding horizon during this SA Innovation Summit 2021. I take it that we've had some very pleasant discussions, and that hopefully the outcomes or the messaging that is coming out from the lessons that have been learned across the ecosystem will go a long way in ensuring that we really broaden the horizon and ensure that most of our startups build on what is already conventional or what is already known. I mean, the likes of Street Stars having been able to roll out the initiative and being able to refine it over the years. It's really been amazing to see that there's so many startups that have come in through the platforms, and coming out of Stephen, having been able to see models that are basically saying, how do you facilitate for that Europe-Africa kind of connection, where at the end of the day you can then be able to have a free flow of ideas as well as innovations that can be impactful. So I'm grateful, colleagues, and I'd like to thank all of you, Lerato, Innocent, and Stephen, for your vibrant participation and for ensuring that you freely impart useful knowledge that, in my view, is really what the essence of SA Innovation Summit is all about. So thank you very much, and have yourself a great morning. Enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.